In today's video, I am bringing you 5 wide receivers that you should either trade for on the low or sell high before week 3 of the fantasy football season. Last week, I had the running backs in a video. I told you to go out and buy low on Joe Mixon, Rachaad White, and Jahmyr Gibbs. All 3 of those guys had their best games so far and are looking like great assets for the rest of the season. We also, in that same video, went ahead and told you to sell high on Tyler Algier, which looks like the right call so far. So today, I'll be talking about 5 wide receivers that you should make trades for, either selling or buying, and hoping to improve your rosters here to get you that fantasy championship. So go ahead and do me a favor, smash that like button. Can we get 150 likes? With your help, I think we can get there. But I'm very excited for this video. Hopefully you are too. My first player, let's talk about a buy low. This is a very sneaky buy low. People know the name, but it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, if you will. I think you should go out and buy Brandin Cooks, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. So far on the year, 2 receptions, 4 targets, 22 yards. He currently sits as a wide receiver 107 on the year. Yes, 107 on the year. This is the definition of a buy low. And look, we are buying him because it was the perfect storm that has led to his non-fantasy existence so far in 2023. Think about it. In week 1, the Cowboys beat the New York Giants 40-0 in a bad weather game. The Cowboys in that game were only on the field for 55 snaps. That was bottom 5 in the NFL in week 1. Then in week 2, Cooks misses because he's dealing with a minor injury that he's now recovered from. And in that game, the Cowboys go ahead and have the most snaps of any team so far in the NFL this year with 83. Okay, so played in a game where there wasn't much need for passing. And then in the second week, tons of offensive snaps, but we were dealing with a minor injury. The good news is that the Cowboys will be in good game scripts moving forward, and Brandin Cooks will be involved. After all, the Cowboys brought in Brandin Cooks to produce, and that's all he's done his entire career. Michael Gallup just wasn't cutting it. So far in 2 weeks, Gallup is averaging 1 reception on 2 targets for 6.5 yards a game. Okay, this team wanted a true complement to CeeDee Lamb after losing Amari Cooper, and Brandin Cooks is their answer to that complement need. After all, like I said, Brandin Cooks has been putting up numbers his entire career. You may have heard me talk about this on the channel before, but check this out. In 6 of 9 seasons in his career, Brandin Cooks has put over 1,000 yards up. Okay, in 6 of 9 seasons, he's had 5 touchdowns or more. In 6 of 9 seasons, he finished as a wide receiver 20 in fantasy or higher. In 4 of 9 seasons, the wide receiver 15 in fantasy or higher. For his career, 9 years in the NFL, he's averaging over 107 targets a year. And per game, he's averaging 7.3 targets per game. Guys, that is impressive in today's NFL. Keep in mind, 9 years ago, the NFL was not throwing as much as it currently is today. The NFL has become more and more a pass-happy league. For him and his entire career to be averaging that many targets per game and in a year, each year is extremely impressive. Last year, he was still pretty good. Finished as a wide receiver 49. He averaged 11.2 PPR points per game. But important context there, he missed a lot of games. In 2022, in 13 games, he finished as a wide receiver 49. But his 17-game pace, so what he was on track to do, he was on track to finish as a wide receiver 27 in fantasy football. 75 receptions, 122 targets, 900 plus yards, and 4 touchdowns. That was his pace last year. And that is more impressive when you consider how awful the Houston Texans were last year. Last year, the Houston Texans, the team that he was on where he put up those numbers, or he was on track to, they were 30th in points per game offensively, 31st in total yards per game, 25th in passing yards per game. They had the 31st most first downs, so only one team was worse than them there. And their starting quarterback, Davis Mills, was a nightmare. He had the 29th QBR in the NFL, throwing 15 interceptions, only completing 61% of his passes. And somehow Brandon Cooks still put up impressive numbers in that offense. He's going to be much better with the Dallas Cowboys. He goes from being on one of the worst offenses in the NFL to one of the best. Joins a team with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard. No team has scored more offensive points in the first 2 weeks of this season than the Dallas Cowboys. So go out, get a guy who's going to consistently produce for a team that is one of the best offenses in the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys. So who could we potentially send away in a trade to get a Brandon Cooks? Well, like we always like to say, there is no one-for-one formula. I can't tell you A plus B equals C because every league is different, which means that every person is different and every person values players differently. What I have done is I've looked at Fantasy Pros ECR, expert consensus rankings for the rest of the season. And with that information, I've given you some names that you can start conversations around. Some of these you can do one for one. Some of them you might have to do in a package, but here are some names that you could explore trading away for Brandon Cooks. How about Courtland Sutton? You could trade him away. Good time with Jerry Jeudy coming back. How about Gabe Davis? Do you want a little more consistency? How about Marvin Mims after a very good start to his career? How about Kendrick Bourne, who had an incredible week 1? Samaje Perine. I put Jamal Williams in there, but he just got injured before I made this video. And how about Rashad Bateman? Here are some names that you can start conversations around. People are always in the comments like, there's no way you get deal done with these guys. Ain't no way this is happening. I'm telling you, start a conversation, okay? Who's a player on your team that you think is equal valued? Start a conversation, okay? Okay, another buy low. I'm going to get to a sell high at the end of this video, so make sure you hang out with me. I'll get to my sell high at the end, but let's talk about another buy low. Again, two guys who are out of sight, out of mind, but will be valuable for fantasy. We just haven't seen it yet. Another example of that, my second buy low here, is Christian Watson. Has not played a game so far, okay? Hasn't registered a stat, but here's the deal. We know how explosive Christian Watson can be for fantasy football. Remember last year from weeks 1 to 9, dealt with some injuries, wasn't on the field much, wasn't playing a high percentage of snap. That's not abnormal for a rookie. But from week 10 onwards, we saw the true upside of Christian Watson. So let me just remind you, what I did is I looked at weeks 1 to 9 versus 10 to 18. I understand he had Aaron Rodgers, but let's talk about this first. From weeks 10 to 18, you saw a good amount of targets, 6.5, 65 plus receiving yards a game in receiving touchdowns amongst the league. In that time span, he had the most. Previously, he was ranked 100 plus, okay? In fantasy overall, he was a wide receiver 9 in that time span, the wide receiver 8 in points per game, and he played over 77% of the snaps. So we know how good he can be for fantasy football. And Watson is one of those rare athletes that I personally just do not want to bet against. Similar to like DK Metcalf when he came out. In fact, since 2000, only 3 wide receivers meet the following criteria, okay? Freak athletes at the wide receiver position. Only 3 wide receivers have been a minimum of 6'4", have run a 4.36 or 40, have run a 4.36 40-yard dash or faster, okay? 3 guys have done this. Calvin Johnson in 2007, DK Metcalf in 2019, and Christian Watson in 2022. Even the great Julio Jones was not able to do that athletically. And now, obviously, he's better wide receiver than Watson. That's not what we're arguing here. We're arguing that Watson is a freak athlete, one of those rare breeds, okay? And the biggest question throughout this entire offseason, which I think we've now answered, was from everyone who wasn't in on Watson is, okay, well, yeah, Watson's good, but can Jordan Love support him in fantasy football? Can Love be that guy? And in my opinion, in the first 2 weeks, Jordan Love has unquestionably answered that. And the answer is yes. Jordan Love can produce fantasy relevant wide receivers. In week 1, Romeo Doubs was a wide receiver 14 without Christian Watson on the field. He put up 4 catches on 5 targets for 26 yards and 2 tuds. In week 2, Jayden Reed. There was no Romeo Doubs, no Christian Watson. Jayden Reed had a big game, wide receiver 20 on the week. He put up 4 receptions on 8 targets for 37 yards and again, 2 tuds. You'll notice in both of those games, neither wide receiver had over 5 receptions. I say this because this is looking like a relatively efficient offense, and you're not going to need 10, 11, 12 targets to be a good fantasy weapon in this offense. A couple big plays per week, Christian Watson's going to return value on his current trade requirements. In general, Jordan Love has been very good this year. Let's check this out. So far in 2023, Jordan Love has the best passer rating. First, no other quarterback is above 120 in the passer rating in the NFL. His adjusted net yards per attempt is the best in the NFL. Tua is the only other quarterback over 9. You see J-Love at 9.38. His deep throw percentage is the 7th most in the NFL, 13.7%. Why do I bring that up? Because where's Christian Watson extremely effective? In the deep ball. And so far, Jordan Love is throwing a fantastic deep ball, and he's doing it the 7th most times of any quarterback in the NFL. And the last two, we'll talk about the offensive line for Jordan Love, which will help Christian Watson run his routes, plays develop, time to pressure. Currently, Jordan Love has the second highest time to pressure, which is good. You want that number to be high. 2.85 seconds to a pressure, not even to a sack, to a pressure. So let's think about that for now, okay? Hike, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Now you are getting pressured. That's a lot of time in the NFL. In fact, he's had one of the best offensive lines through the first 2 weeks. His line is giving him more time to sit in the pocket than any other quarterback not named Patrick Mahomes. Every other team, the Packers have been better than. And if you look at his pressure percentage, that is currently first in the NFL. He's only being pressured on 19.6% of his dropbacks. No quarterback has less pressure per dropback than Jordan Love so far. In fact, he's the only quarterback under 20% in the NFL. So buy low on Christian Watson because this is the perfect match. Hopefully you get where I'm coming from, and hopefully you get what I'm saying here. I mean, maybe even Jordan Love is a buy low at this point because that's an efficient offense you want to be a part of. Just because you haven't seen Watson doesn't mean that he's not going to be great for fantasy. And anyone who's out there who's questioning him, who's worried about the injury, go pounce now. Here's a couple players, again, according to ECR, rest of season rankings, that you could start a conversation around, okay? Jacoby Myers, Hollywood Brown, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Drake London, Jahan Dotson, Javonte Williams, Isaiah Pacheco, and Damian Pierce. Go ahead and start a conversation around some of these names and get Christian Watson on your team. Okay, the third player I want to talk to you guys about, we will get to just in a second. I want to quickly tell you guys about a way that you can support our work here on the Fantasyland Football channel. If you want access to my rankings, 300 plus players every single week ranked, start and sits at each position, even defense and stream and special teams each week. If you want access to incredible articles from some of the best minds in the industry, if you want all that, then go ahead and use our promo code LAND when signing up to the Flock Fantasy website. You'll get 30% off your membership. And get this, if you choose the Mother Flocker tier, you will unlock what we call the Fantasy Hotline, which here at Fantasyland, the Fantasy Hotline is a direct DM to us for advice. So if you want to talk about trades that you've gotten in your inbox or trades that you're going to send, you could send those through to us in a DM. Check the website out with a pinned comment and make sure you sign up with our code LAND. Okay, I've given you 2 buy lows. I have a sell high coming, but now I want to talk about a buy high. You know, not every player is a buy low. Sometimes you have to recognize players that are good and probably will remain good for the rest of the season. So I'm going to bring you a player that I am buying high on, I believe will continue to be great for fantasy. That player is Nico Collins. We are buying high on Nico Collins. So far in 2023, he has 13 receptions for 20 targets, 226 yards and a tutty. Okay, wide receiver 6 on the year so far. Now, do I think he'll be a top 6 wide receiver at the end of the season? Probably not. But I currently would value him as a top 24 wide receiver rest of season. I don't think, personally, I can't think of a single person in this industry who was hyping up Nico Collins before the year. Let me know if I'm wrong. Genuinely, like, tell me down below. Oh, no, this guy was really high on him because I want to give that guy props. And the reason I say this is because There will be some people out there in fantasy leagues who think maybe this is a fluke. No one's talking about Nico Collins that highly. No one talked about him beforehand. Maybe I could go out and sell this player that no one's really loving so far on social media or in videos. But I'm here to tell you that Nico Collins looks like the real deal, and I don't want to sell him. I want to buy him, even at cost. Honestly, the Nico Collins breakout, I think it's here. I think we are witnessing the Nico Collins breakout. He's been so good in 2023. Check this out. So far in 2023, I'll give you where he ranks and his averages, okay? Amongst wide receivers, tight ends, like receptions, anyone who can get a reception. This is where he ranks. 8th in targets, he's averaging 10 targets a game. 12th in receptions, averaging 6.5 a game. 5th in receiving yards, averaging 113 a game. And if you look at his team yards percentage, the amount of receiving yards his team has gotten, what percentage of that has he contributed to? 36.1% of his team's total receiving yards. That's 11th best in the NFL right now. That's a higher percentage than Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman, AJ Brown. Somehow a higher percentage than those elite wide receivers. His yards per route run is 16th at 3.1. He has 4 missed tackles forced on the year. That is 6th best. And important metric, shout out to the fantasy points data, because they have a great database that they have over on their website, which is where I found some of this information. First read targets. When the quarterback drops back and routes are being ran, what wide receiver does he look at first? First read targets. Nico Collins is 6th in the NFL. That's a high number. 17 of his 20 targets so far have been first read targets, meaning Nico Collins is looking meaning CJ Stroud rather is looking for Nico Collins when he drops back in that pocket. We love that. And Nico, to be fair, think about this, guys. Nico has never had a quarterback like CJ Stroud while he's been on the Texans, okay? What I loved about CJ Stroud in the pre-draft process over on our Dynasty channel was his accuracy. And you are seeing that, his accuracy here in 2023. That's been on display. In his second ever game, CJ balled out. He had 384 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. We have, quite literally, hang in there with me, the perfect fantasy situation in Houston. A competent quarterback, number 1. A bad defense, which currently gives up the 7th most points per game, meaning you're going to have to throw the ball a lot. In return, this team has been required to throw the ball the 4th most times per game so far. For fantasy purposes, you guys would have heard me say this. Does that sound right? I don't know, whatever. You guys would have, my English is tripping me up. Before the year, I told you guys that the Minnesota Vikings were a fantasy factory. They throw the ball a ton. Their offense is bad. They're constantly on the field. We have that here in Houston as well. In fact, in the first 2 games, the Texans are averaging 45.5 passing attempts per game. Ridiculous type numbers. By the way, if you do want a cheaper option than Nico Collins, because I'm about to tell you some options and trades, I am still all in on Tank Dell. I really do think there is enough in this offense to go around for Tank Dell and Nico Collins to be good options, flex options in 2023. So Tank is also a buy here. He's the cheaper option if you can't acquire Nico. And sometimes he might be on waivers for some of you. So here's some players that I would trade away to get Nico Collins on the roster. Hollywood Brown, sounds crazy? Yeah, give me Nico Collins. Courtland Sutton, give me Nico Collins. Christian Kirk off that big game. I don't think that that's something that's going to continue. We'll talk about that in a second here later. Romeo Doubs, Jahan Dotson. I love JSN. In Dynasty, it's not a second thought. JSN is a top 12 guy for me in Dynasty. No way I'm selling him for Nico Collins. But in redraft, give me Nico Collins. Same thing for Drake London, Tutu Atwell, and Gabe Davis. Nico Collins looks like he's on track to have an incredible year, a breakout season with CJ Stroud. Okay, I'm going to give you the last buy low wide receiver in fantasy before week 3. And then I'm going to give you a sell high. Okay, so hang around. All right, the last buy low I wanted to tell you guys about is my guy this year. He got injured. It started off rough, but I think good things are ahead. Jerry Jeudy. So far, he's a wide receiver 101 on the year. It's not been good, but he's not played much, okay? We know that. Important things to note. Firstly, Russell Wilson has been vastly improved so far in 2023. I know they're not winning games, but anyone who dives into Russell Wilson's numbers, his analytics, can clearly see that he is a much better quarterback under Sean Payton than he was under Nathaniel Hackett. Let's look at these numbers so far in 2022 compared to 2023. Now, keep in mind, 2022, larger sample size, but so far, let's look at the differences in his game. Completion percentage up almost 8%. Insane improvement. Passing yards per game are up almost 10. Passing touchdowns per game, this is where he ranks. Last year, he ranked 19th in passing touchdowns a game. This year, he ranks 3rd, okay? Which that's important for the wide receiver connected to your quarterback, right? His passer rating shot up this year. His adjusted net yards per attempt goes up a full point. And by the way, his passer rating last year was 34th in the NFL. And currently today, it is top 3 in the NFL. We talked about this a bit before the year, but you cannot underestimate what Sean Payton does for an NFL offense, what he does for a quarterback, what he does for a wide receiver room, and we're already seeing that pay off. Jerry Jeudy, let's get back to him. He was not a full-time player in his debut in week 2. He played 45 of 66 snaps. That is 68.2%. Jerry Jeudy's not a 68.2% player, okay? Last year in games when he was healthy, he averaged 87% of the snaps. So you have to anticipate that as he continually gets more and more healthy from the hamstring, he'll play a much higher percentage of snaps. More snaps, more routes run, more targets. The good news is last week, Jerry Jeudy was targeted on almost 3% more of his of his snaps than Courtland Sutton, AKA meaning Jerry Jeudy's the number 1 when he's back. When he's healthy, he's the number 1. And I know, if you've been with this channel for a little while, you may have heard this already, but friendly reminder of how good Jeudy was with Russell Wilson to finish the 2022 season, okay? From weeks 1 to 8, it was rough. But from weeks 13 to 18, Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy hit their stride and there was no stopping them. From weeks 13 to 18, you can see the comparison if you want from weeks 1 to 8. But in weeks 13 to 18, he was averaging 7.5 targets per game, over 6 receptions, over 87 receiving yards, a half touchdown a game. He was averaging 18.5 PPR points a game, and he was a wide receiver 6 from week 13 onwards. In fact, from week 13 onwards, Jerry Jeudy, like we said, wide receiver 6. Guess who was behind him? That's a large sample size. That's 5 games, 6 games. Behind him was Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Per game, on a per game basis, all those guys played 6 games. Jerry Jeudy was the one that you wanted. How crazy is that? So don't miss out on Jerry Jeudy just because he hasn't been healthy. He's going to be better and you need him on your roster. So here's some names that you could trade away to go out and get a Jerry Jeudy. Again, there's no perfect trade. Go out and start a conversation. But here's some names: Hollywood Brown, Christian Kirk, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin. I think DeAndre Swift, if you need a wide receiver, this is a good sell high. Isaiah Pacheco, Javonte Williams, Dameon Pierce, Elijah Moore, and Jacoby Myers are all names you could start a conversation around. Okay, so I've given you a lot of sell highs. A lot of buy lows. To finish the video, I'll give you a sell high. You can disagree with me, that's fine, but let me just say why I think it's time to sell high on this player. Let's sell high on Christian Kirk. I believe that the fantasy gods gave you the perfect opportunity to sell high on Kirk, okay? Wide receiver 35 on the year, and we saw the 2 extremes of Christian Kirk in week 1 and week 2. In week 1, he had 1 reception, 9 yards, 60% of snaps played. In week 2, 11 receptions, 14 targets, and 110 yards, 81% of the snaps he played. However, even myself and us on this channel, we predicted that Christian Kirk was going to have a much better game this week. specifically because of the matchup versus Kansas City. Last year, the Chiefs gave up the 8th most fantasy points to slot wide receivers. So we anticipated that Kirk was going to have a much better week 2. Kirk was also the beneficiary here in this game of Zay Jones missing part of the game with an injury. Zay played 89% of the snaps in week 1 and just 66% of the snaps in week 2. You also saw Calvin Ridley go down for a time and he came back up pretty quickly. But what we saw in week 1 was that in 2 wide receiver sets, it was Calvin Ridley and it was Zay Jones on the field. We saw that all throughout preseason. You had Christian Kirk even come out and say in 2 wide receiver sets, I'm not on the field. Meanwhile, Kirk was mostly only out there for 3 wide receiver sets. So it is my opinion, okay, that week 2 was a perfect situation for Christian Kirk, and it yields the perfect sell high before there's this frustration of boom bust every single week, okay? They were down most of the game in week 2 versus the Chiefs, which led to a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. They weren't able to establish the run. When they do establish the run, it's 2 wide receiver sets. They'll be able to do that in future games, especially an upcoming game versus the Texans. Zay Jones missed part of that game. Everything lined up, okay? Again, I'm not saying Christian Kirk is a bad wide receiver. I'm not saying he's bad for fantasy, that he's going to be awful. What I'm saying is there are more consistent players that you can roster and go ahead and, sell high on that week 2 performance. I would rather have Jacoby Myers, George Pickens, Jordan Addison, Jahan Dotson, Zay Flowers, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Thomas, Nico Collins, DJ Moore. The list is obviously bigger. I can only put a certain amount of names, but it is time to sell high on Christian Kirk if you can, because I believe there will be more inconsistencies on the way. Do me a favor, go ahead and smash that like button. Let me know what you think of the video. If you like the takes, if you disagree with them, that's fine. You can let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you like the content. Whew. I just talked for like 25 minutes straight. My lungs do not have that capacity, but here we are. Do me a favor, drop a like. Let me know if you like the content. I'll see you in the next one. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.